Alrighty, hey everybody, welcome back to The Way Ramen and to another episode of Ramen Recipe Breakdowns here, where I take a look at some of these YouTubers' ramen recipes and I try to give my commentary on my thought process for how they make the ramen. Again, there are no rules in ramen making. These are just things that I find interesting or mistakes that I've done in the past that I can kind of like use these videos to kind of teach things that I've learned as well. So we got a lot of requests for Adam Liaw's videos. He has a ramen school series where he kind of breaks down a bunch of different ramen techniques and ramen things. It's pretty cool because it's pretty obvious right away when I watch through some of these videos that he actually either went somewhere to learn how to make ramen from somebody, or he's just a big ramen nerd like myself or like other people in the ramen community, because some of the things that he says and does, normal people don't know about this kind of stuff. Even if you speak Japanese, you wouldn't know some of these things. And Adam is just an all-around impressive guy. I mean, you read his Wikipedia page, he was like a lawyer for Disney, then goes back to Australia, wins MasterChef Australia, you know, does all of these cool TV shows and YouTube channels, and he writes cookbooks and just pretty much just killing it with everything he does. Also speaks pretty good Japanese. So yeah, let's just get right into it right now. I'm gonna take a look at the first episode of Ramen School, the how to make a basic ramen broth, Chintan clear soup. So I like Chintan, that's my thing. I love Chintan soup, so I'm gonna just watch this video. Funny thing is, I actually forgot that I watched this video before and I actually commented on it a while ago. So it's gonna be a refresher. I forget what he does. So let's just watch it together.
Okay, so on this YouTube channel so far, we've done quite a few of these kind of short series. We did the versatility of teriyaki.
Okay, so I think he's actually gonna talk about the ingredients. I kind of vaguely remember now, he talks about the ingredients a lot, so I'm gonna just actually skip to the method thing. He does a great job explaining the ingredients and, you know, what you're using them for and stuff. Let's just skip right to, I don't know where he is. Let's skip right to where he starts making the soup. Okay, so.
Fewer ingredients sitting on the bench. But these are our ingredients for our very basic Chintan.
Chintan is a really clear word right away that shows that he knows a little bit about ramen, because normal Japanese people actually don't know this word. Here, I'll put the kanji up on the screen right here. This is the kanji for Chintan. But if a Japanese person were to see this kanji and try to read it, they would read it something like shinyu, or they would try to guess like the reading, because they can obviously understand the meaning, clear hot water, but it's not a common word and it doesn't use Japanese readings. I think this is actually more similar to the Chinese reading of these kanjis, and because ramen itself came from China into Japan, I think whoever taught Japanese people how to make ramen used the Chinese words for them, and the Japanese chefs that continue to make ramen continue to use these Chinese words. It's a Japanese attempt at a Chinese reading of these characters. So digressing again, but let's just get right back into it.
And I'm gonna show you what's called a double stock method. A double stock method is something that is so popular in Japan now.
So double stock is called double soup, literally called double soup in Japan. I think he explains it in the video as well, but a double soup is when you make a stock out of like animal products and a stock out of like fish products, and then you blend them together. So it's called dobutsuke, and dobutsuke is like basically animal part soup, dobutsuke soup, and then you make a gyokai soup, which is like fish or ocean soup, and then you blend it together, and the idea is you get the umami from the ocean soup, the gyokai soup, and then you get the flavor and other things from the dobutsuke soup, the animal stock.
Single stock is just throw everything into a pot, boil it all together. But when you do a double stock, it allows you a lot more variation. It allows you to control things a lot more. You know, things like seafood and meat, cook at very different rates, extract at very different rates.
So he's correct with that. The seafood and meat stocks will extract at different rates. So that's one of the benefits of double soups. I talked about optimum extraction times in the previous videos. The gyokai soup doesn't take very long. It's mostly the time invested into that is just soaking it overnight, and then when you put it together, it's like literally less than an hour usually. The animal stocks, the dobutsuke stocks, the broths or whatever they're called, soups, those take a long time, 6 to 8 hours usually, even longer. Sometimes some people go 12 hours and stuff, 18 hours. So doing a double soup is a great way to kind of optimize that stuff. Another way you can do it is you make your dobutsuke soup, your animal stock, and then you just add in the gyokai stuff right at the end. And so it's kind of like you making a double soup kind of, but in just one pot. It's like a single soup, but then you're getting the timings to all kind of match up by just adding the products all the way at the end. So that's another way you can do it.
I always keep a spreadsheet or a log of all the different ramens that I've made. You can see here on my own spreadsheet.
So this is what I'm talking about, that he's probably a ramen nerd or somebody who appreciates ramen. For the dashi, he's written in Japanese, Raosu dashi kombu. And Raosu kombu is a variety of kombu that it's kind of popular with certain ramen chefs. So there are many varieties of kombu. In America, we just call it kombu and we don't think about it much. But in Japan, they have these different varieties of kombu. So they have Raosu kombu, Hidaka kombu, Rishiri kombu, Ma kombu, and all of these different kombus have their own characteristics, different levels of umami, different flavors. And the fact that he took the time to say that I'm using Raosu kombu, he can understand that there's differences in how you handle them and the flavors that come out of them and the level of umami that comes out of them. So that's kind of one of the things that kind of tipped me off that he probably is kind of a ramen nerd, or at least someone who appreciates the art of making ramen. So let's just get right into the broth making.
So let me prepare these vegetables and aromatics first. Just some brown onion. I'm going to cut that in half. A whole head of garlic, some ginger, thick slices, and some carrot as well.
So I just want to comment on the aromatics here a little bit. The aromatics that he chose are pretty common actually, but aromatics themselves aren't really that interesting. I think the thing that I would like to highlight is the amount of aromatics that he's using, because I see a lot of these recipes on YouTube where they're dumping like these huge trays of cut up carrots, ginger, garlic, onions, all of these things, and they're dumping it in because I think maybe that's in Western stock making, you put a lot of vegetables, but for ramen soup, the general idea is the flavor of the soup is the animal parts or the gyokai soup or the fish stuff. The flavor of the soup is not vegetable soup unless you're making a vegetable soup. So the aromatics are there as an accent to the main flavor. And so this amount of aromatics looks a lot better than some of the other recipes that I've seen where they're dumping like tons of things in, or they're roasting the aromatics to try to get more flavor out of them. Because the idea is the primary flavor is the animals, and the aromatics are there for aroma and to support that primary flavor of the animals.
So now for our meats. The trotter's already cut. I just measure the weight of that, 700 grams.
So the pork trotters here are a really good idea. There's gonna be a lot of gelatin that comes out of this, and it's gonna make the soup have a pretty thick mouthfeel. And that's a good idea if you're doing a double soup. So the idea for a double soup is you're making a pretty thick, viscous animal stock with adding a lot of gelatin parts, and then you're cutting that with dashi, which doesn't have that mouthfeel. And then you end up with like kind of a good balance of mouthfeel, umami, and flavor. So it's a good idea. Pork trotters are great here.
Now for my chicken feet. What I need to do here is just take, sounds a bit gross, but the toenails off the end of each toe of the
Chicken feet also great for gelatin, but again, if you watched the last video with Babish, wasting a lot of the gelatin in that first knuckle, just cut off the tip of the toenail, and it's a better way to do it. It takes longer though, so I can understand doing it this way too. It's not a big deal, it's just kind of the thing that some people think about a lot.
Now for our chicken, I just want to cut this up into
I believe these are stewing hens he mentioned in the earlier part of the video. Stewing hens are great. Regular chickens work too, but stewing hens have a lot more flavor in them. And cutting them up like this is also just fine.
So now I'll just get about 9 liters of water into this and get onto the stove. So this is where your metal ruler
skip
comes
through a little
in handy.
bit.
The meat stock is going, so now for the seafood stock, because we're going to mix the meat and the seafood stock together, which is why this is called a basic double stock. I'm going as simple as possible, just kombu and katsuobushi.
So this is for the gyokai soup, for the double soup. Kombu katsubushi. So a lot of people know that when you're making dashi, you're using kombu and katsubushi, but the science behind this is pretty interesting. So kombu has a lot of glutamates in it, and katsubushi or other fish products, dried fish, dried meats, has something called inosinic acid, which is a complementary, I don't know what it is, like nucleotide or something, I don't know the science things. I just call it an umami enhancer. And basically what happens when you mix glutamates and inosinic acid at the same ratio, you get a bump in perceived umami flavor, up to maybe 7 or 8 times of what you would get using just one or the other alone. So that's why in Japanese cuisine, you almost always will see kombu paired with some kind of dried fish product, because you're looking for that exponential umami factor.
These are the 2 basic ingredients for your classic Japanese ichiban dashi.
So he says ichiban dashi. This is like pretty cool because ichiban dashi is a pretty standard washoku idea, but I don't think a lot of people in the West know about it. Ichiban means number 1, so ichiban dashi means number 1 dashi. He's gonna, basically what you can do when you make dashi is you can make your first dashi using the dried products, strain it out, and then you can make what's called a niban dashi using the previously used kombu and katsubushi. Maybe add a little bit extra fresh katsubushi, and you make a second dashi, which has its own characteristics, a little bit different, but also very usable. And you can use that for different applications, or you can use it to stretch your ichiban dashi if you need more servings of dashi. So it's pretty cool that he called it that. It's just one more point for the, should make some kind of counter here, like, oh yeah, ramen nerd cred, ichiban dashi.
I'm just gonna put my kombu straight into the cold water. Katsubushi will go in later, but the thing with kombu is you don't want to boil it, and actually you want to keep it at as low a temperature for as long as possible. You know, kombu extracts fully its flavor at around 60, 65 degrees.
Yep, that's correct. That's the temperatures that you're looking for when you're making kombu dashi. A lot of ramen chefs will soak the kombu overnight to extract it and then just bring it up to heat quickly. I think he does a different method here though.
So you can actually put the kombu in the cold water and just leave it in the fridge overnight. But I figure while you've got a slow cooking meat broth going already, you may as well do the slow cooking method for heating the kombu. So I'll just put the kombu into the cold water and then put it onto a very, very low heat and slowly bring that up to temperature over the course of about an hour, hour and a half.
I've never tried this method. I'm sure he's probably a pretty good chef, so he knows what he's doing. But I do know that some washoku chefs will say that kombu needs to be extracted at the proper timings as well. If you go too hot, too fast, you don't get optimum umami extraction. And if you go too slow, too low, you sometimes end up with a slimy dashi, and that's what happens. If you've ever made a dashi, you messed up, it's like slimy. That's what happens if you go too low, too slow. So I don't know, I mean, but that's what it is with ramen, right? Like if that's what he wants that more viscous feeling dashi, more to add for the mouthfeel a little bit. Maybe that's what he's going for, so there's no rules again.
So after about an hour over medium-high heat, this is almost coming to the boil now, and you can see this scum of protein and blood that's forming on top of our stock. We just skim that off with a fine strain.
Skimming off the scum is essential for making chintan. You don't want any of that brown gunk going back into your stock. It's kind of bitter and tastes terrible. I also like to point out that he waited until it kind of formed into these scum clumps. I think a lot of people get anxious and try to skim the scum off as soon as it starts to come out, but letting it kind of coagulate a little bit makes it easier to actually take it out faster. So it's good, like letting it coagulate like that and then skimming it off.
Once I've removed the scum and not too much more is being produced, I turn that down to a really low temperature, and that's the secret to a chintan, or a clear ramen broth. After about the same time, you can see that our kombu, the water's starting to get warm, a little bit of steam is coming off there. And you test your kombu, just stick your thumbnail into the kombu.
Okay, you can kind of see that the kombu is a little bit slimy. I mean, it's probably not that big of a deal, but that's the one thing you might have concerns about going so low or so slow, is that you might get some of that slime incorporated into the dashi.
And that is leaving its imprint, as you can see. It's time to take the kombu out, and we can bring this kombu stock to the boil.
So this is really important. This is really cool. So after you make your kombu dashi, you take out the kombu, then you bring it to a boil. And this is what you're supposed to do. There's a couple of reasons for this. So the first one is it kind of distinct the smell. Some people say kombu has a pretty strong smell. So boiling it kind of gets rid of that. And it also gets rid of any of the bitter kombu taste that can kind of be extracted from raw kombu. So great idea to bring it to a boil after the first initial simmering and steeping.
The kombu comes to the boil, dump in the katsuobushi, boil just for 2 more seconds, then turn the heat off and let it sit for about half an hour.
So another great point, cutting the heat, then adding the katsuobushi in. Great job. The timing, 30 minutes. Again, no rules. Maybe that's the flavor that he wants, but I think generally for katsuobushi, because there's so many different varieties and different makers maybe have different extraction times, it's probably best for most people to taste it as it's kind of steeping, because if you oversteep katsuobushi, it can get sour. So just be there tasting it, maybe 5 minutes in, taste it and see if you like it. If it's already got that smoky katsuobushi flavor at 5 minutes or 10 minutes, feel free to strain it. Don't feel like you have to stick to timings on recipes. Use your gut instinct when you're cooking based off someone else's ideas, because the different ingredients will always change the final outcome. So have faith in yourself.
Then that can be strained out, and that is our clear dashi. The meat stock's been going now for a total of about 2 hours, and it's looking clear, it's looking flavorful. Now it's time to add in the vegetables.
So he's adding vegetables in 2 hours in. I guess it just matters how long he goes with the cook time. 2 hours in, if he goes another 1 or 2 hours, it's probably fine.
It may seem a little anal to be taking measurements of...
I think this ruler thing that he's doing, it seems more applicable to ramen shops. I mean, I could be wrong. I definitely have done that sometimes where I'll get like a chopstick and kind of mark where it was when I first filled it up and then kind of just to track the evaporation and how much I've concentrated. But I think it's a more practical idea for ramen shops and less for home cooks. I have another video coming out that I'm trying to work on about the differences between making ramen at home versus the restaurant, something that I learned from Kanda-san, this really fantastic Japanese ramen cook. So yeah, I guess I'll talk about it in that video.
So our meat stock is looking fantastic. The vegetables have been in for about 2 hours now, and the whole thing's been going for a little over 4 hours.
So he went 4 hours total, a little bit over 4 hours. I think that's the bare minimum you can go for a Chintan. You're not gonna extract all the flavor from the bones and stuff at 4 hours. So, I mean, but the Sano-san recipe that I have on the channel that he wrote, he goes 4 hours, so, and it works. Like it makes a pretty good tasting soup, so.
I'll take this out, pass it through a sieve. I've actually got 2 sieves here, which I think is quite a useful thing to do. So I'll just scoop out everything from the pot first and pass it through these 2 sieves. When you've got the bones,
yeah, so you can see that the bones and the chicken feet especially hasn't really broken down. So I don't know how much gelatin he's extracted into the stock. So it's probably gonna be pretty soupy. I mean, that's fine though, because like I said, there's no rules with ramen. It's just like if you want it like this, then you make it like this.
things in the sieve, I push it through. I like to
See, like he wants to push it through, that's fine. Like you can push it through. He wants more of the flavor to come out. He doesn't care about the clarity too much. Perfectly fine too.
Now you can see from, I guess, what I'm throwing away here, that this isn't a stock that is completely broken down. A Chintan is a clear stock, so it tends to be cooked for a relatively short period of time at a relatively low heat, so it doesn't break apart and break down as much as, say, a tonkotsu or something else.
I kind of disagree with that a little bit. You can definitely do Chintans low and slow for a very long time, and you can break down everything there and still keep the stock super clear. I think the thing that makes a lot of these Chintan stocks cloudy is, in my personal opinion, is just adding the aromatics too early, because those things will break down and those things will emulsify into the stock even without a lot of agitation. And that's just been my experience. So if you just add the aromatics toward the end, the last hour or 2 hours, you can go like 10 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours with a Chintan, still keep it super clear and have more of the flavor and gelatin extracted into the stock. This stock, I mean, these bones definitely have a lot more flavor in them. And just like with the dashi, how you can make a niban dashi, you can make a niban soup as well. So a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll take the bones from a Chintan that are not fully extracted, put them back into a pot, maybe add some fresh bone, and then boil that like at a rapid boil, and you'll make a paitan broth, kind of like a tonkotsu, but if it's chicken, like a tori paitan. And that's a great way to stretch the bones, get a little bit more cost performance from the bones. And paitan soup is probably like just as popular, if not more popular than Chintan soup. So yeah, you can have both, Chintan and a paitan from bones that you use twice.
Here, because it's going to cloud our stock a little bit too much, but you can use this for a secondary stock. You know, you can cover that with water again, boil it again, great for stir frying, just general purpose stock.
Yeah, so the secondary stock is the niban paitan he's talking about.
And now we just mix the two together.
So he actually added the dashi directly into the stock here. It's fine, it's a pretty common way to do it in Japan, but for me personally, I like the dashi to be as fresh and crisp as possible. So usually if I'll make a double soup, I'll do the dobutsuke soup first, and then maybe chill it, and then have the dashi soaking overnight. And then the day that I'm gonna serve it, bring a fresh dashi in and then blend that in the day of, either in the bowl itself or like this. And I just find I like that better. I think dashi doesn't last too long personally. I like it fresh, so. But there are shops that do it like this too. They'll blend the dashi, then chill it down and stuff, so. Not a big deal, he's doing a great job.
Well, this is what we spent the last 6 hours of our life putting together, our Chintan basic double stock.
Okay, so this one's done. Let's stop this video here and let's actually check out the final bowl assembly. I think he does like a apuri style ramen, so let's do that one.